So mimetic, so people understand it, it's just trying to imitate others. Is that correct?
It's imitating other people, but imitating them at the level of their desires. So the reason, we use the word mimetic is that imitation is something that's a bit more visible, something that we're aware of. Mimesis or mimetic desire goes under a surface level imitation to the very imitation of interior things like what other people want. So we're imitative creatures. It's how we learn math, it's how we learn language, it's how we learn all kinds of cultural norms. And many people have known that for a very long time. What Rene Girard discovered, who is the thinker that really inspired my book, is that we imitate really profoundly interior things like what other people want from a very young age, starting with our parents, starting with maybe our siblings and our friends. And that informs a lot of the decisions that we make in life, from what major we choose in college to what kind of career we go into. And we usually don't even understand how that process is playing out inside of us.
So the obvious question in everyone's mind would be, where am I supposed to get my desires from, if not from my social context, my peers, those around me?
I would say you have to get them from somewhere. One of the main points in the book is that we don't generate our desires out of thin air. We don't generate them out of nothing. This is a romantic lie that I think we have in a highly individualistic culture. We're social creatures, and our desires are going to come from other people, real, fictional, historical, right? They don't have to be people on social media. They don't even have to be the people that we interact with every day. I've been deeply influenced by, books that are 500 years old, in history, and models of desire that I've taken, that I've drawn on from a bigger universe. So I think maybe it's time to expand our universe. The same thing with when I was an entrepreneur. All of my models, all of my influences came from this very insulated world of Las Vegas startups. And it was only when I sort of admitted other influences in my life, like, hey, maybe I should kind of look outside of this little bubble that I'm in, that my world started to open up a little bit. So, I think we need to just be intentional about the kinds of people that are affecting what it is that we want. Because normally we just take it for granted. We think that everything that we want is the product of our autonomous selves. And so there is some aspect of having the humility to realize that we are influenced, but we can choose who we're going to be influenced by. I live in the middle of Washington, D.C., so I've got to, I need to be careful about, I can't even go to a bar with my wife without sometimes being negative influenced by the quality of the conversations that I hear in every TV being, cable news, 24 hours a day. So I have to look outside of the world that I'm in even today.
The way you structure your book was about kind of the descent of where mimetic desires lead you. And then you talk about various techniques and countermeasures to examine them more deeply, which I enjoyed. And I did examine my own life a bit. I guess it would be impossible not to. Now, the entrepreneurial mindset or approach through thick and thin has actually fueled me for a long time. My approach to it has been solve a problem. Problems like, hey, like, why aren't there enough entrepreneurs? And I spent 6 years on that. And then the next was, hey, like, why aren't we responding to AI and advancing technologies? Maybe we should alleviate poverty and get in front of this thing before AI comes and displaces millions of us. And then now it's, hey, our political system seems deeply broken and dysfunctional. Like, let me work on that. So you're an expectant parent. Yep. You're going to be a dad for the first time, and that's an awesome time and journey. I did relate that the first year I was a father was the toughest year of my adult life, where this entrepreneur mindset you have, at least for me, it totally failed me. Because you get there and you're like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Like, let's just be can-do and positive and optimistic. And in the context of having a newborn, a lot of it just didn't matter, didn't work. A friend of mine said something to me that stuck with me. He said, it's the only time in your life that just saying, okay, I'll just work harder, is a total non-answer. And so it stretched my soul in a particular direction. It led me to see deficiencies in myself and my family in a way that I hadn't known. But this is a long-winded way of asking, like, if people are on a version of this journey, how do they start to find what you call these other models of desire, or something that can be more lasting and sustaining, and might lead to fulfillment, growth, personal satisfaction?
So there's a difference in the book between thin desires, which are these highly mimetic, shifting desires, the things you want today that you're highly unlikely to want 6 months or a year from now, and then thick desires. And just to relate this to what you were describing, Andrew, because I've got a baby on the way, and we were talking a bit before we got started about what that first year was like to you. There's something about grounding yourself in a concrete situation or concrete sort of objective problem. Not to call a baby a problem, but there are a lot of challenges, right? And there's something incarnational about it that somehow strips away the thin stuff, and I think having some kind of groundedness, real problems, are a way to sort of remember what's important, which is another way to think.
Make your life worse, and then the thin desires will fall away.
Usually we don't need to go looking for those things,
No, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, so my dad has Alzheimer's, and that's been an incredibly grounding thing in my life for the past few years. Every time that I'm with him, life becomes very simple, and like all of these, crazy ideas that I have, some are good, some are probably not so good. They sort of, they recede, and I'm able to focus on something that's incredibly important to me. Our baby's not even born yet, and from what I hear, there's really nothing like the moment the baby is born, but already I've found some of my thin desires fading away a bit, and I know my wife would say the same thing. So there is, I think, grounding oneself in something real and incarnational is an important first step. And then just kind of reflect, and there's also an element of history with thick desires. So, when I've reflected back on my whole life, going back as early as I can remember, like Little League Baseball, growing up, the things I really cared about, and then kind of tracing your own history of desire and like how what you've wanted have changed over time. Like, I wanted to be a doctor. I literally applied to med school because I watched a lot of ER with my mom, and I thought George Clooney was really cool. And then just sort of seeing the way that different influences have played out in my life, Tony Hsieh being another one, gives me perspective to see like patterns. And I gain some pattern recognition, and I see, Luke, usually when you're involved in something that integrates all of these things, it's something that you do for a very long time. It's like sustainable for you. When you are attracted to something and it feels like this, if it feels like a push in the back rather than a gentle, nice tug at the front of your shirt, there's a difference between the way that those two things feel. Kind of like getting caught up in a riptide. I now know what those things feel like, and part of why I know what they feel like is because I've went through this process of looking back at my life very carefully and seeing what happened when I pursued certain paths based on, whether those influences were kind of strong mimetic influences or whether there was something a bit more enduring and peaceful about my involvement in those things.
Hey YouTube, glad you're enjoying the podcast. If you really like it, hit subscribe, and then YouTube will notify you every time we have a bang up new guest. Thank you.